The year is 1651, slap bang in the middle of the war that would come to be known as the English Civil War, or actually it's come to be known by a lot of different names, but that's a topic for another video. The last part of England that is still royalist and under control of the King's men is Cornwall. However, in 1651, Cromwell's troops push out the last royalists from Cornwall. However, the Scilly Isles, which are some islands not very far off the Cornish coast, revolt, and they are the last part of Britain to remain in royalist hands. The navy at the start of the war had been on the side of Parliament, but in 1651 with Charles II's rebellion they switched sides and became royalist instead. Now we have to go over the channel to the The Dutch and the English had a habit of helping each other out after the 80 Years' War, and at the outbreak of the English Civil War, the Dutch government decided to side with the side that was most likely to win, and indeed they chose the right one because they formed an alliance with the parliamentarian side on the Civil War. After all, the parliamentarians were also pushing for a similar Republican-style government to the one in the Dutch Republic at the time. And have you ever wondered why their colour was orange in the conflict? Actually, it's got nothing to do with the Dutch, it's because it's the Earl of Essex's colours, but it's an interesting comparison. Of course, this meant that in 1651, when the navy changed sides, they now had an excuse to attach the Dutch ships in the English Channel laden down with spices from the East and West Indies. And of course, the Dutch, who love their spices, were not too happy with this new arrangement. So the Dutch sent the fleet under the leadership of Maarten Harpertzoon Tromp to the Scilly Isles, and they demanded reparations from the royalists there for all the spices that had been stolen by the royalist privateers. And when the royalists had bigger balls than they anticipated, they did what was the only reasonable course of action left to them. They declared war on the Isles of Scilly. So what happened next? Did the Dutch fleet bombard the Isles of Scilly out of existence with their huge cannons? Or did they send in the Marines to spearhead an invasion and then annex the land around it, making it a new polder and a new province in the Dutch Republic? Well, not quite. In actual fact, the Dutch fleet went home. They did come back, and then they sort of waited around the Isles of Scilly, and meanwhile actually the parliamentarians had built their own navy and they forced the royalists to surrender their ships, which meant that the issue of royalist piracy in the Channel no longer was actually an issue. And the Isles of Scilly were recaptured by the royalists, and the last part of the land that was still loyal to the king was taken in under the new English Commonwealth. So then the Dutch really had no reason to do anything with Scilly, but they forgot one important thing, which was to actually sign the peace treaty with the Isles of Scilly. In 1985, a historian from the Scilly Isles called Roy Duncan actually wrote to the Dutch embassy in London, asking them to officially dispel the myth that the Dutch Republic had ever gone to war with the Scilly Isles. Now, the Dutch got in touch with the government back home in the Netherlands, and they checked, and they actually found that this was no myth at all, and that the Dutch government was still officially at war with the Scilly Isles. Now, as a gesture of goodwill, they sent their ambassador, Jonkheer Rein Houdekoper, to the Scilly Isles to sign a official peace treaty, where he made the joke that it must have been harrowing knowing that the Dutch could have invaded the Scilly Isles at any time. And officially the war ended after 335 years. And who knew? So I actually have another theory, and they didn't actually win the Nobel Prize, I just thought that was funny to put in. I actually have another theory that perhaps there is more to this story than we might think. Now, if we look at the two flags, we see that the Scilly flag is remarkably like the Dutch Prinsenvlag, which was the flag being used at the time of the start of this war. And I actually think that Maarten Harpertzoon Tromp was trying to send us a message from the past. Now, if we look at the Scilly flag, of course, in the biggest feature are the 3 stars. Now, where else do we find 3 stars like this? In the constellation of Orion. Now, if we take this back and look at the flag, the main difference between this and the Prinsenvlag is that it has a cross. Now, of course, this is a shape, but it's also an instruction. It's telling us to cross something, but what's it telling us to cross? Well, if we look at Orion in the night sky, it's the direction of the Atlantic Ocean. He's telling us to cross the Atlantic Ocean. Even the name the Scilly Isles, if it was English, there shouldn't be a C there, so it must come from a Dutch etymology of Scilly, which sounds an awful lot like schil, which is the Dutch word for layer. Now, what has layers? Onions have layers. Which city is famous for its onion bagels? New York. Everyone, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this little silly video, see what I did there, about the 335-year war between the Netherlands and the Isles of Scilly, in which precisely 0 people were killed and 0 were wounded, as well as 0 being taken prisoner, and there was no territorial change whatsoever. So I hope you have indeed enjoyed this video, and I was actually inspired by a comment stream on my Facebook page. Link to History with Hilbert on Facebook is in the description, so go and give it a thumbs up if you're interested in some behind the scenes stuff, as well as what I'll be working on in future videos. And it was a comment stream. I'd put up a meme about Henry VII and the Cornish, and actually I didn't know this, but some of my viewers are Cornish, so big shout out to all you Kernoek out there, and they were commenting about this war, and I thought this is really interesting. I'd heard of it before, and I thought this would be a great topic for a video, so big shout out to those guys, thanks a bunch, and I hope you have indeed enjoyed this video, and that you'll tune in again next time. So don't forget to give me a thumbs up on here on Facebook if you're interested. I'm on Twitter as well if you want to follow me there for memes and banter and shits and giggles, that kind of thing. So thanks for watching, and I hope I'll see you all again very soon.